NLPers. Great. Well, what I'd like to do to start with is, again, apologize for this thing being late. Sometimes that happens. But why are there so many fat hypnotists, nurses, and nutritionists? It's a good question. So we usually get started by typing ready in the question box, but I'm the one that was late due to my computer crashing. But let me ask, what would happen if you could discover why so many professionals have weight issues? When I say professionals, I mean hypnotists, NLPers, nutritionists, nurses. Oh man, a lot of nurses, a lot of doctors, things like that. Why do they have weight issues when they know what to do, but they don't seem to do it, right? Well, it's no secret that the number of fat nurses is over 50%. Over 60% of the population is overweight, but a lot of the nurses are overweight. It's the biggest complaint they had. I remember one time at my clinic, probably 20% of my clientele were nurses. Even nutritionists seem to have weight issues, which leads you to wonder about the nutrition that they're telling people to have. What are the number of overweight hypnotists and NLPers? Well, it's probably close to the general population, if not higher. I mean, I go to conferences, and it's not unusual to have a new person say, wow, there's a lot of really obese people here. And when I say that, I don't mean just big. I mean obese. And it was kind of weird because the people with the answers seem to have the problem. And there seems to be a fear of asking for help. So, it's interesting with this. I don't like it there. Let me move this one more time. Good. So, so what's going on with this? Well, what seems to be happening is we help others. That's what we always say. But many of the professionals that help others can't seem to lose weight. We help others lose weight, but we can't lose it ourselves. And one of the things that happened, it seemed to work for us for a while. It's not unusual to see somebody get into the field of hypnosis because they lost weight with it, but now they can't seem to lose the weight. So it worked for a while. And that goes into knowing versus doing, right? Knowing versus doing, which I always think is interesting because it makes you feel like a fraud. When you're overweight and you're working with people with weight issues, and hypnosis that's the number one thing it's known for is weight. So if you're overweight, sometimes you feel like a fraud. I know I did. I mean, I was at a conference and I went to put on one of my suits I very rarely wear because it was a really dress-up thing. I remember they told me to be there and dress nice because I was going to be getting an award. So of course, I broke out the good suit, but I had to lay on the bed, take a deep breath to button it and zip up my pants. And I remember thinking, what happened? I mean, I've always been an athlete, martial artist. I bodybuilt for a while, power lifted. I always work out real hard. What happened? What happened? Well, several things happened. Several things that I know now. But then, I felt like a fraud. I'm up there, and I can help people. I wasn't obese. I weighed about 20 pounds more than I do now. But I just didn't like the way I look or the way I felt. I felt like a fraud, right? And so what begins to happen with that is, it stops you from really capturing the number one market share. And that is, it stops you from capturing that market, right? And I won't mess with this anymore. So, many of us help others lose weight. Work for us for a while. Again, knowing versus doing. Feel like a fraud. Stops you from big money. Now, here's what's tried generally. People do the low-carb diet. Fits a lot of people very well. I do quite well on a low-carb diet. But sometimes, how practical is it? Sometimes. I mean, to me, it's the easiest diet to follow, especially like I travel a lot. I can always, grab a burger and just throw the bun away. But then there's other issues that come in, and there's things you need to do with that, right? Then many people try the low-fat diet. Now, all the current research is pointing out, we're going to get into the newer research, that this was a horrible thing pushed on the American public, the fear of fat. We became fat-phobic. And if you notice, the more fat-free we became in our foods, the fatter we became. because they replaced fat in foods with calories, and calories still get you fat. And you need fat to survive. You need it for cholesterol, estrogen, some of the neurotransmitters. Your brain needs fat. You know, there's some people that would speculate that, you know, we have that spike in dementia. Of course, part of that's we're living longer, but part of that too is tied into that if you're in a, you know, if you're really on a low fat diet, like a lot of people get obsessed with, well, your brain's not getting the fat that it needs, and fat keeps all those neural cells healthy, right? And then people go into high cardio exercise, which depending on your age actually becomes counterproductive. And one of my evidence for that, I've seen some aerobic instructors that look like crap. They just flat out look like crap. You know, same with the people that are all like, I'm on a no-fat diet and I do all this cardio, and you're looking at them, they're in a health food store, and you're like, shoot me now. If I look like that, just shoot me now. You know? So, you know, that doesn't seem to work. It works. And this goes into when the whole thing about exercise is the myths that we have about exercise, especially in our culture, right? Then people do weight training, this one's very good, but they make a major mistake. And that is, especially men, they train like they tried to train, especially if they were a weightlifter when they were younger, like they're still in their teens or in their 20s. They're powerlifting, they're doing all these heavy weights, which as you get older, doesn't work for men. Just flat out doesn't work. You know, it actually becomes very damaging to your joints, to other things, right? Gives you a funny looking build. So, you know, it depends what you want to look like and also how you want to feel, right? And then there's all the diets, the Zone diet, the Ornish diet, South Beach diet, yada, yada, yada. There's literally diets from A to Z, you know, Atkins to the Zone, right? So there's so much information. There's probably kernels of truth in all of them, but it's like what's working, what's not working, right? Then people use self-hypnosis or self-NLP, which can work somewhat, but the bad part about knowing the skill set, especially as a hypnotist or an NLPer, is, I don't want to say it takes away the efficacy of it, but it seems to lower the effectiveness of it, especially when you do it on yourself. Sometimes you need someone else to guide you through it, right? You can't think the thought and be the thinker. We're going to get to that in a minute, right? Same with like the nutritionists, they seem to know it, but knowing's not doing. Well, it didn't work. A lot of this is because there's a lot of out-of-date information. There's just been a big thing released. A lot of people, you know, I was just talking about it, and no, that's not right. You know, it says they reclassified breakfast as just another meal. It's not the most important meal of the day. And I just said that, oh, no, that's not true. That's true. That's what the research says. You know, the great thing about science is that physicist says it's true whether you believe it or not, right? But it's almost like people get crazy when you say that. Just like you say, you know, eating eggs does not raise your cholesterol. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. No, none of the research does. In fact, the real research says cholesterol has very little, if anything, to do with heart disease. You know, when people have a major coronary, over 50% of the people that have a major coronary, cholesterol falls in the normal range. Interesting, right? But we have this thing about it. What it is, there's a causal linkage that then, and especially, to be honest, there's a causal linkage, and there seems to be a pharmacological cure for it, or a way for companies to make money on it. Boom, it becomes the norm. You know, and then there's the power of marketing lies. Oh, healthy food, low fat, this, that, and the other thing. You know, and we believe marketing. I mean, that's why it works. That's why I market. That's why you market. I mean, if it's done right, it's hard not to believe it, right? And then there's the medical and nutritional lies. I don't want to say lies. It's just they find out what they were teaching before is now no longer true as it moves through time and they get new information. Much like the thing about the study that says, you know, meat and you know, messes with your cholesterol. Well, the actual first study that they really rammed in was done in the 70s, and it took all kinds of meat, including especially processed meat, right? You know, the sausages and the hot dogs and that people were eating a lot of that. Well, that's not just, and it's got extra saturated fat. It's got all this other stuff. They didn't spin out and say, what happens if people eat good cuts of beef, you know, good meat, you know, just good meat? Well, they didn't do that, but it came, oh, and then it becomes a myth. The myth becomes fact, right? And somehow eggs got thrown in there too, right? Then, in fact, CNN actually got busted on this last year when they put a thing out that eating eggs is as bad as smoking. And what they did, at first they took people with heart disease, and then they were smokers, and then they asked them about eating eggs. And basically, I think what also happened is these smokers were trying to justify, no, it's not the fact that I chain smoked cigarette, didn't exercise, probably drank too much, ate like shit. No, I ate eggs, and even all the science jumped in and said that it was junk science. It was not validated. It was horrible, but it made the news. And so somebody did come up to me. See, I told you that. I go, what study was that? And they told me. And I said, well, look it up. It wasn't true. Again, there's a war going on for your mind because your mind controls your wallet. And if I can win your mind, I can win your wallet. So that's what the marketing does. That's what's going on with all this stuff, right? They're using your genetics against you. You're genetically prone to want sweets. You're genetically prone to want high fat because for millennia, if you could get fruit, which was rare for most hunter-gatherers, wow, it would carbo load you up so you could survive in the wild. Same with fat, right? In fact, the human brain exploded in its growth when we became omnivores and started eating meat. So we were getting into fats. Our brains got the nutrition that it needed, and our brains, exploded, but the growth phase really, really rapidly expanded. So this is some really cool stuff. So we have in our genetics, we want sweets and we want fat. Well, if they know that, they could turn your genetic code against you to get you to want more of it. And then there's the lowering of the standards, right? And my evidence for this is I ask everybody to flip on Turner Classic Movies in the States, right? And I've seen this all over the world, these old movies from the 50s, 40s and 50s, right? And even the early 60s. Everyone was thin. All the movie stars, all the people in the movie, the crowd scenes, everyone was thin, right? Right? It's fascinating, right? But now, if you're big, it depends on how big. Oh, we'll say you're not that big. Well, you're probably, comparatively, yes, right? And then we have the mistake of the intellect. Your knowledge stops you from succeeding because once those myths become beliefs in your subconscious mind, even if you go, it's hard to get rid of them. It's hard to get rid of them. You need a lot of evidence to the contrary. You need to work on that to get the new knowledge in to overwhelm the old knowledge, right? Then you kind of get stuck in place. This is what happens with our exercise program. I see guys do it. They start lifting weights again. Well, they lifted weights in their, let's say, high school because they played football. Maybe they lifted some where they could go to the gym once a week, hit a few weights. Woo, they look great. Da, 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 da. Life gets in the way. Now they're 50 pounds overweight. They decide to start lifting weights. You see them in the health club. They're overweight and they're trying to really heavy bench press, really do this and that. Well, guess what? Your whole system has changed, so you're stuck in place. You're trying to used to do work in the past, which no longer works in the future or even in the present, right? And a lot of these are habits when you're learned young, right? You learn these habits young. If you grow up in a family that says, eat something, you'll feel better. Oh, you have to clean your plate because people are starving to death in Africa, Asia, someplace, right? So you got guilt about not eating food. You got guilt about leaving food on your plate. I just cooked this just for you. Don't you love me? Yeah, okay, so I ate it. Now, so we had these habits that become, and that's what comfort food is, right? Because I hear people say, oh, I'm Italian. I have to eat pasta. Really? Really? But it becomes these habits that become fact. So you need a new reality, right? There's a new reality out there and it's fighting with the old reality, right? So are you getting better or are you getting old, right? There's this whole concept now about people, where this whole anti-aging thing. All my one friend's a doctor studying and he's got me signed up to take the board. So I actually go back and learn biochemistry and all this other stuff again to become a board certified anti-aging professional. Even though I'm a psychologist, I have to understand all the biochemicals behind it. Anyway, but they talk about, are you getting better? Are you getting old? Right? Now, with not just fixing, let's say, your weight and your genetics, what about your thinking? Do you ever hear people say, oh, when you get to be my age, well, what's that got to do with anything, right? It is age just a number, right? It's just kind of interesting. When you go to certain cultures, they age, when they say age gracefully, well, but they're still real busy. They're doing things. So you're getting better or you're getting older, right? And how is your mental aspect about it? But your ego is what keeps you fat. If you start a new skill and revert back to your old ideas, you'll fail. This is what happens all the time. Trainers talk about it. Sales trainers, marketing trainers, business trainers. You come in for a seminar, I teach you a new skill set, right? But you revert back to the old skill set. So you fail and you blame the new skills. Now, I did that. It didn't work. Well, you didn't do it that long. You didn't really incorporate it. You didn't make the changes necessary for this to really work, right? So your ego will listen to bad advice, especially from family and friends, especially if it validates the belief you want, your old belief, right? And family and friends are the number one causes of sabotage. Because if you change what you're doing, it's threatening to your family and friends. Because it's a spiritual growth to go change anything, to lose the weight, to stop smoking, get back in shape. All of a sudden you're threatening everybody else, right? And I even say this in our community. If you drop 25 pounds before the next conference and you go to the conference looking good, there are people going to be coming up, are you okay? What do you mean, am I okay? Well, you lost weight. Yeah, because I quit eating that crap, right? But they're going to act, oh, no, because you're threatening to the group dynamic of everybody being fat. So here's what you need to do in 4 steps. You need to realize the scope of the information, the problem out there, and get the correct information. What is the problem? How fat are you, right? How long have you been fat? What have you tried in the past that didn't work? So you need to do that. You need to let go of the old mindset and get open to change. You have to be open to change, right? Personalize your plan. You have to let go of, I already know what I need to do, whether that's in exercise, whether that's in your eating, whether that's in readjusting. If you're eating, sometimes it will help readjust your hormones, which will help make you feel better. But you need to personalize it for you, right? You need to stay with the basics, because people get way too fancy, especially too quickly, right? And then just stay with the basics. It will work. So ego. Why do I stress the ego? Well, ego stands for easing God out, or eliminating good or new options. Ego. You eliminate good options because it doesn't fit with your current model of the world. So the secret key is overcoming ego. Easier said than done, especially if you've had success in the past, especially if you're trained in certain things, because you have to be willing to accept new ideas. You have to decide on a new skill set. You have to decide to accept it. You probably have to be willing to get a mentor, because sometimes in our field, I'm always fascinated with those in our field, hypnotists, NLPers, coaches. And you say, well, who's your hypnotist or your coach? Oh, I don't have one. Well, then why would I trust you? Right? A coach should have a coach, right? A mentor should have a mentor. You always hear, I always think of sports a little bit. You always hear the coaches talk about, it's called a coaching tree, right, in football. And they talk to each other. They have mentors, especially the older guys kind of mentor the newer guys. Even though they're in competition, it's kind of interesting. So but all of a sudden now we become coaches, hypnotists, NLPers. We don't have a coach or a hypnotist or an NLPer that works with us. We're above that. I'll do it myself. Well, I hope a heart surgeon doesn't say, I'm not going to go see a heart surgeon. I'm just going to do it myself. No, you have to get some outside plan, help. And that can help with your detailed plan, because the outside eye may see a problem. And then you need to make all these changes natural. So that becomes the kind of person that you are. Because in a way, especially if you're trained in hypnosis, NLP, and some of these other skill sets, you are special. But our special skill set brings special problems. You have to overcome some knowledge to install new knowledge. And to do that, you have to stop the editor, right? I'm kind of getting a little shtick going, if you want to call it that, where I'm the hypnotist to the other hypnotist. People come down here to hang out with me for a day and work on things, right? They sign up for my coaching because they go, I'm stuck, right? So one of the things I have to do is say, well, we're going to work together. We're going to have to work on you overcoming the editor. What do you mean by that? Well, I don't want you to like, oh, I see what you're doing. You're doing a visual response with this, this, and this. Part of this, I bury it with what I do because I've been doing it a long time. But you have to stop that like, oh, I like that. I need to remember that for my clients. Well, this ain't about your clients. This is about you, right? Because once you fix yourself, it's easier to fix your clients. Then you need to go with the flow. And to do that, you have to give up control. Easier said than done. And again, you have to overcome your ego, right? So step one, look at how the food industry's changed, right? The food industry has just blossomed into this huge monstrosity. And again, it's about profit. It's not about keeping you healthy. It's about selling more food, right? That's it. We just have to accept that. You know, that's what they're there to do, is to sell more food. Well, what's a good way to get people to buy more food? Get them fatter so they eat more. End of story, right? So then you have to learn to use your genes in a new way. Your genes or your genetic code doesn't really change, I guess, but, you know, as you mature and things change in that, you have to adapt to it, change, do some things. You have to use it in a new way. And then you have to be willing to look behind the curtain. So when you see some of this research, where does it come from, right? And, you know, be willing to like, okay, let's really look at this. Who's sponsoring it? You know, what's going on? And again, like with the food industry, you know, there's some interesting things you need to do. You need to research and question everything, right? Because again, it's all about that, right? I remember in a book I read, which I talk about in the training, and I suggest everybody read it. But they talk about there was a meeting of like all the cereal companies, all the major cereal companies heads got together, and this was in the 90s, and they talked about, you know, the epidemic of children getting fat, and you know they knew that, you know, they changed the formula of cereal so they're really high sugar, which of course is going to make you fat. And they talked about how they could make some changes in the cereal, you know, to you know, make them healthier, put in more whole grains, drop the sugar count, drop the fat count, you know, make them healthier for people, yada, yada, yada. And they had a big meeting, and the guy that presented was so happy, and all these people were there. And one of the heads of one of the major ones stood up and said, you know what? They're not paying me to make the population, something like, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, I'm being paid to make more money for this corporation. And I need to sell more food to make more money. So I'm not going to do this. And that was it. Nobody did it. You'd like to think they do. But again, if you're a stockholder in the corporation, if they took a 20% hit because they reformulated all their cereals to be healthier, so all the little fat kids didn't want to eat it, you'd be like selling your stock. So then the stock value drops, you fire the CEO and the board, right? So you have to look at all those things and question things. And again, you know, I'm always fascinated that we let companies that have vested interest in research actually do the research, you know, supply it or pay for it, right? So you need to develop your new ideas about these things. You know, read them a lot, and you'll see these things that just ring true. I believe in intuition. I believe your higher self and your guardians, if you want to call them that, will help guide you. Once you get exposed to new ideas, drop your ego and look at things. You'll develop ideas that work for you. Step 2, you have to drop inflexible thinking, because that equals failure. You know, you have to be flexible. Semper Gumby, always flexible. You know, you have to look at your eating behaviors and beliefs and society's eating behaviors and beliefs. A real quick one. As a society, you know, breaking bread was part of our culture because for most millennia, food was rare. And so when you did get together for a feast, a wedding, a banquet, you know, that's what the Thanksgiving was. Food was rare. We have a bounty, so we're going to share it. And the best thing you could do was share your food with other people, right? So it becomes part of our culture, and it becomes part of our cultural belief set, right? So if you show up for something, you go, no, I'm not really hungry. Oh, you have to eat something. You have to eat something. No, I'm not hungry. I ate a couple hours ago. yeah, oh, well, you don't love us, or all this. So you have to look at all of this, and then your own behaviors and beliefs about it. Then you have to look at the psychology of possibilities. Is it possible to be thin, healthy, and attractive, right? You kind of have to look at mindful eating and mindful exercise. What that means, pay attention to what you're doing. All the studies say, in fact, there was one just out that said, if you watch really action movies or things like that, you eat more because it's got your attention in such a way you're not aware of what you're doing, right? And so you have to be mindful, put your mind into it. That real mindfulness meditation training, they talk about, taking 10 minutes to eat a grape. I'm not talking about, going that crazy, but I'm talking about like being mindful because, again, just like journaling. When people journal how much they eat, sometimes they're shocked. Same with mindful exercise. You put your mind into it. I read research that says 10 minutes of exercise where you have to think about what you're doing. So you're maybe watching somebody and you're doing what they're doing, and it's not just lift weights or run mindlessly or get on a treadmill, watch the news. 10 minutes of mindful exercise where your mind and body's engaged. I believe there's also this, your cross hemispheric training your brain when you're, using this arm and this, your left arm, your right leg, you're doing these weird things. So you're actually training your brain with it. But it said that like 10 minutes of that exercise is better than 30 or 40 minutes of mindless just walking on a treadmill, even if they both get your heart rate up, right? Because it's a mind-body connection. And again, in our field, we talk about mind, body, spirit, and I rarely hear anybody talk about the body. They'll talk about the mind, they'll talk about spirit, but the body goes away, right? Step 3, you have to see what models of these kind of things that are out there resonate with you. Which one seems right for you? Then you have to stop thinking and start doing. You need to be accountable to someone else. You really need to be accountable to someone else. You need to make it fun. If it becomes work, it's why I like a lot of the hypnotists that do a lot of weight loss when I was doing it, and I've talked to other people, Scott McFall, Tom Nicoli, the ones that really do a lot of weight loss, would talk about, it's kind of a counterintuitive, but in a hypnosis program for weight loss, the more you talk about nutrition and the more work you make it, the less successful you are. If you make it fun and not about the food, it seems to be more successful. Lower the stress, make some changes, right? Because you'll do what's fun. If it becomes work, you get rid of it, right? And you got to dare to be different. You got to be the person at 60 that still has a 31-inch waist, if you're a male, and can do exercise and feel great, right? And go, well, because you got to dare to be different and put up with it. I love when people tell me, it's just because you're genetically gifted. Really? Yeah. Okay, fine. They don't see me work out 5 days a week, lift weights, watch what I'm eating most of the time. I'm on the 80% rule. If I do it 80% of the time, I'm successful. And I had to let go of childhood ideas, right? Step 4, realize you're an animal. You're a physical being. And with that, you have a genetic tree that got you where you are, right? Hunter-gatherer, the nomadic lifestyle. That's our genetic tree. That's the way we developed for millennia. That is in us. That's what we have to kind of look at when we go to do things, right? And learn from history. What's going on that's causing these effects? Why are we blowing up when we have more information, right? There's all kinds of stuff out there. And you need to reclaim a childlike fun in physical activity. Find something that's fun for you. We always say that, reading a book. Yeah, great. But you need something physical, something that engages the mind and body, right? Whatever it is, you need to find something physical, and then you become a weight warrior, like a spiritual warrior. Realize you're at war, right? You're at war with the marketers, with the nutrition companies, with all this stuff that's going on. You're at war, and you don't want to be the casualty. As General Patton says, I don't want you to die for your country. I want the other son of a bitch to die for his. So you need to be a weight warrior, right? And take that attitude. And then stay with the basics, You gotta understand the basics. And when all else fails, you fall back to your basics and build back on those. And again, you have to realize you're a spiritual being having a physical experience. It can be very spiritual to get your body in shape, because this is your gift from God. What you do with it back is your gift. So you want to take care of it. An example, sweet tooth. It's from the book Salt, Sugar, Fat. And, that you have this thing in us called the bliss point, right? That it's just perfect. Perfect. It has the right fat and sugar. Right? Well, what happens, fat and sugar is cheap and easy to put into food, right? So, and it wants you to hit more. It wants you to get more because it burns out your glycogen and insulin and stuff, so you end up eating more. Well, what's happened through time is, especially in the Western culture, they've raised our bliss point. When you look at food, like let's say cereals from the 50s, the sugar count was, let's say, here, right? Now you look at it, it's up here, right? So what we think of as our perfect sweet, perfect taste is much more caloric and fat, right? I became very aware of this when I went to Asia, and I like carrot cake, right? And had the cream cheese frosting. Ooh, fat and sugar, But I'm like, I worked hard, I'm going to eat one. And I ate it, and I went, blah. It wasn't sweet enough for me, right? And then I was talking to the guy that, he's lived in the States, and he goes back forth to Asia a lot. He goes, oh, yeah, when he's here and he has a piece of cake, it chokes him because it's so sweet. So he said it's like biting into just a bowl of sugar. Ugh. Right? Well, their bliss point's lower than ours. And generally, when you're in Asia, you look around, they're thinner. They're getting fatter, but they're thinner. Well, their bliss point's lower. And again, I was at a banquet thing, and everybody's eating, and they brought out this dessert. And I was like, isn't this delicious? I'm like, it's okay. Right? Wasn't sweet enough, didn't set me off. So it was easy for me to go, I've had enough. Right? Because it didn't set that trigger off, the bliss point. And that's how they're using your genetic code against you. They know this. It's been studied. And the higher they set it, the more you want. Again, going back to the cereals, right? If you get kids wanting it up at this level, as they get older, it's going to keep going up, right? So we just did. We looked at just the scope of the problem that a lot of people aren't aware of, that you need to be aware of. And this is what you're fighting, right? And some of the possible causes, some of the solutions, some of the things you have to do. And you really have to look at the hierarchy of thought, or the HOT model, right? And what that is it disassociates conscious and non-conscious processes, right? You have 3 levels of thinking. The first level is the primary sensory experience. I'm angry, I'm hungry. Let's use I'm hungry, right? Now, when you're in the first level of thought, if you stay there, you may take action on it. But what if you pull back to the next level? Like, here it says I'm angry, but what if you went, I'm having the thought I'm hungry. Am I really hungry? I'm not really that hungry. You've pulled out of it. And just that will pull you back, right? So you're thinking about the experience. Then if you pull back one level up, I'm thinking I'm having the thought I'm hungry. Why am I thinking that thought that I'm hungry when I'm not hungry? Well, I'm mad, right? So you've gone to the highest level of thought where you're thinking about the thinking about the experience. Well, if you change the process at that higher level, or especially at that second level, well, the behavior is going to change. I'm not really hungry. I'm pissed off. Oh, I'm not really hungry. I'm bored. Oh. So that you can use that to change. You're right. So this is what we have to really begin to develop and make those changes. So here's what I'd want you to have. Number 1 is realize and know your truth. Embrace new beliefs so they work for you, because that's what it's all about. Live the new model. Make it yours. Make it comfortable. This becomes who you are, right? But develop a warrior mindset, that you're at war. You're a warrior, and you have to take care of that. And hopefully it expands out to your friends and family. Now, whether they want to take it with you or not, but you're responsible, and walk your talk and lead the way, right? It's very important. So introducing the ultimate fat loss for professionals. What is ultimate fat loss? And I believe it's the best course on fat loss and true lifestyle change available, especially for professionals, hypnotists, NLPers, nutritionists, nurses. It's different than anything else available today because I've lived it, and done it so many times, and I've helped thousands of other professionals with the problem. If you don't have this course, you're destined to keep doing what you're doing, right? And you can get started at home. So I broke it down into modules, right? First, we talk about the new reality. Then we talk about new beliefs and new facts. Then we talk about developing a new you. So this becomes who you are. And then we talk about live the warrior way, right? We're going to have updates. In fact, I'm going to add a model on the HOT model and some new thought processes about this weight loss and some of the new research out there, like I said, about the breakfast thing, about some of the other things coming up that, why we do what we do, right? There'll be recordings. There's a community you can interact with. There's some books that you get to download. So the total value, if you added all this up, would be about $900. I do charge $97, right? 10% of what the value is. So go to ultimatefatlossforyou.com. Again, I'm going to be updating this as soon. I'm going to add some new modules, right? On some of the new research out there, on some of the new thought processes to help us make this change and to help us keep going. So ultimate fat loss. Without it, you stay fat. You blame others. Oh, it's my genes, it's my parents, it's my genetics, it's the culture. You accept defeat, right? I know as a coach, an athletic coach, I was watching one and he got rid of some guys and they asked him why. And he just said, I can't have anybody on my team that will accept being defeated. I want them mad if they lose, right? And looking at how can they win next time, right? You have to get rid of that inner conflict. Now with this course, you have a new belief set. You get fact-based information, the new facts, the new information. You develop a lifestyle change. You become a true leader in the field. So what to do? Go to ultimatefatlossforyou.com, www.ultimatefatloss4you.com. Sign up for Ultimate Fat Loss for Professionals. Access and should kick you right in. Or if not, email me right away and I'll get you in. Lately, there's been glitches in the internet stuff I've done. But hurry up and do it now. Go to ultimatefatlossforyou.com. I'd like to thank you for being part of this call. And again, I apologize for coming in late. But again, my internet crashed and my computer crashed. So I'd like to thank you, and I hope to see you as we trudge the road to happy destiny.